I'm Martha Scheeler, and I'm going to interview Laura Hobbs, who's running for Supervisor District 2, Shasta County. Hi, Laura. So good to talk to you again. What's happening with you these days?
Well, I was just at the Board of Supervisors meeting today. There's some interesting items on the agenda. There was some shenanigans going on with the naming of the Citizens Election Commission. It was important that it be named a certain way such that the members would have authorities as county officials to do the investigation they needed to do. And what's happening is that what was duly passed November 7th, after the ordinance was passed, somebody, either county council or an employee, went in and changed the wording of the ordinance. So this is the type of thing that I think is maybe even a bit worse than just obstruction. It could be there could be legal ramifications for doing such. It's a delay tactic. It's one way that they keep the it's to almost neuter the commissioners in their ability to perform what they need to perform to investigate elections and do their job.
So what would be the purpose of changing the name? Those cast vote records you have asked for, we have asked for, that have been analyzed, that have showed these irregularities, actually in the language says that those are not for government to review, it's for the citizens to review. So
Absolutely.
Taking the word citizens out of it seems like a big deal.
No, that's actually not the big deal. The difference is between the word committee and commission. So a committee doesn't have any authority as officers of the county to look at public records or to, request certain things or to be inspectors or judges. They were called commissioners. They would have more teeth. Not only did they change the wording, but they added new wording into the ordinance to say that the recall signatures shall not be inspected. So they specifically did not want the signature verification, which is really anomalous. Typically, there's a 20-25% rejection rate. And what we're seeing in the Kevin recall signatures, there's a 0.0005 or less rejection rate. I mean, it's just unheard of. So it's cause for alarm and cause for investigation, but it's so far off of the statewide average of 25%. It's an extreme outlier, I would say. You could put it that way, just statistically an outlier. So it gives us cause for concern, and it raises some red flags that I think need to be looked into.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you get to see the actual deliberation over the change in language?
Actually, this item got pushed into private session, so we did make public comment on it, but we'll see what comes of it after they come out of closed session.
Okay. Well, and you don't think that this language was changed by Patrick Jones or Kevin Cry?
No.
Am I right?
In fact, the board members themselves, I don't think, are involved in changing the language. It would have either been an employee or county council. So the person who puts the agendas together and writes does the packets and writes the ordinances. So it's a very serious case of insubordination at the very least.
Right. So that'd be fun to be a fly on the wall in that talk, because stakes are pretty high since they're trying to recall Kevin Cry.
Yep.
And it's based on them only because they want to have a majority on the board, and the point, if he's recalled, isn't the governor going to appoint a new supervisor?
The governor changed our state law so that he gets to appoint vacancies.
What could go wrong with Governor Newsom appointing?
A lot of things could go wrong. I just feel like it's not okay for the state to appoint representatives for our local government that don't represent the citizens of Shasta. We as citizens have the right to self-govern. And if there's somebody coming, from outside of the county to tell us who's going to be our supervisor and who's going to be in charge in writing local ordinances and voting on them for our county. I think that's wrong, and that's an overstepping of the state. This is just one more act in a long line of acts where they have tried to slow walk the establishing of this committee. They do not like this committee. Our opponents, they think that this is an assault to Kathy Allen, and they don't understand why this committee was established, because people had legitimate concerns about election integrity, basically as a way to delay us getting any justice as citizens.
Tell me about the Zog fire.
Well, the Zog fire was settled by our district attorney, Stephanie Bridget, and she received a very big sum of money, and most of that money went actually to her NGO called Children's Legacy Fund, and about $200,000 of it went to the citizens of Aigo Ono to build a play structure in honor of one of the children that perished during that fire. It just seems to myself and to a lot of people of my district that was not a fair distribution of the settlement money. To have close to $8 million, it's $7.8 million going to an NGO, and then just $200,000 going to the citizens of Aigo Ono. Now,
who reviews that? Like, the county had to have reviewed that settlement, right?
The county paid for them to litigate that case. However, there was no oversight. Stephanie Bridget decided on her own, without advisement from the Board of Supervisors, on how the distribution would be of that settlement.
So she's an elected official, kind of like Kathy Darling Allen, and they don't really get to tell her what to do. Is that right?
Basically, I mean,
the money should be addressed to what was harmed.
Well, I agree with you. I think there was a problem there and a discrepancy, and there was a special meeting held. The county council actually asked for the meeting because our supervisor from District 1, Kevin Cry, asked to see certain documents related to this case, and he performed public records request for them. And according to what I witnessed, it appeared that the county council was overwhelmed by the magnitude of his requests, saying that it could take months. So she wanted this special meeting to be held where, I guess, to narrow down the requests and all this. So they did hold a meeting. It was their last meeting. I believe it was held on Monday, November 20th at 9 a.m., if you want to look up the records. And Mary Rickard and Tim Garman were just completely dismissive. They didn't understand why there was even a meeting being held. They really were out of touch with the citizens of Aigo Ono, who want to look into this. They want their questions answered. And yeah, and they didn't think that the distribution of the settlement was fair. And that's all Kevin and others were saying was it just looks unfair, and they wanted to find out more.
A lot of people they can't run their cattle on the ground because the ground is completely burned up. They can't, and the way that these fires burn, there's something component to these hot fires that I don't understand completely, but it affects the way that you can regrow. You have to treat the dirt because there's these chemicals, and the retardants are chemical too. I don't understand the biology of it, but anybody that lost that much grazing and the cattle, that's a huge loss for them.
Yeah, it upsets me too. And one thing that Patrick Jones mentioned is that there were two high-ranking county officials who, after the settlement, went to work. They left the county and they went to work for the Children's Legacy Fund. And they were high-level county appointees, and they are county officials, I should say. And they left their official position and went to work for this NGO as soon as the settlement was done.
My goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
the Shasta Fire Protection Board. That was on the ballot, right?
That's right. They went ahead and approved that election, and I think that's great that they got the Shasta Fire election board in place. The citizens chose who they wanted to fill those seats, and they chose overwhelmingly to establish that board and actually to fund it as well. And I think that they need that. It was a 92% approval at the ballot box for that to proceed. And I think that does need to be certified right away. However, in the November 7th election, we also had the Shasta Lake School Board election between Camille King and Casey Bowden. And that election was not so clear-cut. It was a very close election. I don't have the actual distribution, but I think it was decided by just a couple of hundred votes. So that election, I think, deserved more time to look and analyze. I hadn't had a chance to analyze the CVR data yet.
Okay.
I will do that, and I think that's important. That's
the cast vote records you have done analysis in the past, and you have discovered anomalies in the tabulation of the votes. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. It basically allows you to replay the election from beginning to end. It's an auditing document that the tabulator automatically generates to show the order in which the votes were counted.
Right.
And I can't say anything at this point until I actually look at the data, but one thing about this election that really concerned me as an election observer is there was no chain of custody between November 6th and November 13th, and possibly even currently. What happened was and actually I did a public records request, but this is based on my personal observation of how they opened the ballot envelopes, and then they left the ballots sitting in open air. They were not contained whatsoever, and with chain of custody, it's also a physical containment of the ballots, so that each time that ballot box is opened, you have an accounting of how many ballots are there. You have two witnesses to sign off on the paper on the date and the exact time that box was opened and how many ballots were there. And then again, when you close it, you seal it off with signatures of both parties and the time and the number of ballots that are currently in the box.
Right.
You have to have an accounting of the ballots. How many go in? How many go out? It's just a basic element of the chain of custody.
Right, and right now, I believe it was last week, there was an article in the Gateway Pundit, and it's called Breaking Exclusive Riverside County, California Caught Providing Doctored Sets of Dominion Election-Related Documents in Public Records Requests. And they actually spoke with the requester, and they had asked for these records, and they were given 3 separate versions with different dates, the signatures weren't at the same time. It's doctored.
Yeah.
So it says the records provided, there were no timestamps to authenticate the times and dates of the signatures that would identify when the documents were created. The biggest question is why are there multiple sets of logs for the same dates? That's why chain of custody matters, because there's no oversight to make sure there's no tampering, and there's no accusation to be made if you have proper recording. The problem is if you refuse to give that documentation, it is in itself almost an admission that you're hiding something. The refusal to allow observation, when they were doing the logic and accuracy testing, they didn't allow you guys to actually observe and hear what they were saying. They made you guys stand somewhere and watch a closed circuit TV, right? That had no audio. It's deliberate. It's actually quite aggressive how she insists that you cannot see what she's doing. If she's not doing anything wrong, why does she need to do that?
Towards the end of our observation there at the ROV's office, my response that I got from every question I asked was put it in writing. So I put a public records request in to see the chain of custody for the Blue Room from November 6th to November 13th. And also for the procedures for their chain of custody between that same time period. And lo and behold, and to her credit, she did not doctor up documents and send them over to me. She said plainly and clearly that they do not perform chain of custody during that time because it's behind a locked door, and because it's behind a locked door, they don't feel they need to. There are also local rules and laws about how chain of custody should be maintained during elections. And it's kind of defeating because they do pay close attention in the beginning as the ballots are entered in, and they have an area where there is chain of custody maintained. It's within a locked cage. It's in the warehouse near the Gillis, and they do have at least 2 people signing off and all that. But if you have one broken link in the chain, then the whole chain falls apart, because you can do a really good job.
It's not just that. They could doctor anything they want. They could do anything they want behind a closed door. There's no observation. So a lot can happen. I'm not saying they are. I'm saying they can. And they shouldn't be able to. Do you think the county, if you were a supervisor for Shasta County, do you think that you might submit and ask for a resolution that they have to have cameras on there, they have to have guards that guard the door, that there's actually observation and security?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things I did ask for in the public records request was to get those videos. They didn't have video in very many places. They had 2 videos, one downstairs, one upstairs near the Bat Cave. So I asked to see the video of the Bat Cave. That's the area where the tabulator is held, the Heart Verity 3.1 tabulation, the central computer, or the brain as they call it. And so the response I got to that public records request was that they are not keeping recordings of it all. So they just write over it every single day, and there's no actual recording kept, which is...
Well, that is a problem, because that is an election record. Even though it's not a cast vote record, it is a record of the election, and they are required to keep those for a certain amount of time. And overwriting a file is actually destroying evidence. That's a problem.
It's a violation of Government Code Section 26202.6, and it says that notwithstanding the provisions above, the head of a department of a county after 1 year may destroy recordings of a video monitoring after 100 days, and may destroy recordings of telephone, radio communications, etc. But it says for the purpose of the section, recordings, let me see. Sorry, I want to skip ahead. But basically they may destroy it after 1 year, but if they destroy it before then, it is a violation of this law. So I'm not pulling out the...
Is that a crime?
Yes, it's a crime.
Okay.
So
would it be, if you were a supervisor, because you're running to be a supervisor, would you think that should be something that's addressed by the Board of Supervisors, since she works, the way that the the elections and the conducting of elections is under the authority in the California Constitution. Okay, so there's a difference between regulations, laws, and the Constitution. All laws and regulations have to be in compliance with the Constitution. So the Constitution is the top authority over laws and regulations. When laws and regulations are challenged, they're often challenged on constitutional, and as a matter of fact, most of the time, constitutional basis, because they are in violation of the Constitution. So that's a big part, and it is in the Constitution that the Board of Supervisors, the governing board is the actual term, it is not just their responsibility, it is not just their right, it's not just their authority, it is their mandate. It is a big deal that they are supposed to oversee how elections are conducted. They are supposed to direct how those elections are conducted. As a supervisor, would you be addressing this?
Absolutely. I think we can make local laws and ordinances to address this and to specify, so that if indeed she refuses to have camera footage, or she writes over the footage and doesn't retain the public record as she should, then she'll be violating local ordinances, and she could go to jail.
Right. In California, California, our Constitution has been amended time and time and time again. And so it's not that it's this old Constitution. It's a problem because they keep amending it to take away our citizens' rights. But it can't. The assertion that the Constitution is outdated and old, it can't really be said. It can be said, but it can't really be true because we've revised it. The legislature's revised it over the years. There have been ballot initiatives that have revised the Constitution. So it is more of a living document than I'm comfortable with.
Right, exactly. And it's one of the best state constitutions as far as giving counties rights to self-govern. So we have that ability. That's it's the same in the way that the United States government constitution gives the states each individual rights to govern how they want to do their elections. So the same basic philosophy applies to the counties as well. The counties of California, each individually, have the right to decide how they want to conduct elections.
Let's move on.
Okay.
You have a website.
Yes, www.votelaurahobbs.com.
www.votelaurahobbs.com.
I will be having a series of town halls where you can come and ask me any questions. They'll be held at the Reading Public Library at 1100 Parkview Avenue. And the next one will be Thursday, December 14th between 5:30 and 7:30 p.m. Thanks.
So I just wanted to let you know I've been doing a little research for something we've been working on as a team. I am co-lead of Team Hope, and we're a group of patriots that have been asking for cast vote records since about August of 2021. We were looking into the Diebold election machines were decertified in 2004. I'm just going to read you what I found, and we might have that be part of this. So the ballots for Palm Beach County, Florida, supplied by Sequoia Voting Systems were at the center of the hanging Chad debacle in the Bush versus Gore presidential election. Sequoia allegedly produced the ballots, which were not within normal specifications, according to some Sequoia employees that were interviewed when they investigated it. That's one of the voting systems that has become another voting system that's currently in use. The technology from those voting systems was acquired. Alistair Thompson wrote in a magazine called Scoop in New Zealand that the greatest upsets in the 2002 midterms were in favor of Republican candidates in Georgia, which was the state using the most voting machines. That same year, Texas had 3 Republican candidates in the same county that had the same exact number of votes, and they were using ES and S machines, and that was in an article in the Columbia Free Press. So California Secretary of State Kevin Shelley, he decertified 14,000 touchscreen voting machines and asked the California Attorney General to press civil and criminal charges against Diebold election systems for fraud. He was moved by computer science reports that revealed the voting machines were vulnerable to hacking. There was something called the Hursty hack that is documented. You can Wikipedia that. And there were 2 professors from UC Davis and Berkeley that later did some testing of these machines. Kevin Shelley says, I want the voters to have the confidence that he or she can vote on paper and have the confidence that their vote was cast as marked. The technology Diebold was decertified, according to Allison St. John of KPBS News. It was decertified by California Secretary of State, and the company's political impartiality was compromised when the CEO of Diebold, Walden Odell, promised in 2003 to deliver Ohio to Bush. That was CEO of Diebold. Later on in 2013, Diebold paid a settlement in a case that was brought against them for bribes and other things that they were involved in. So in 2004, there was a problem in Ohio with the Diebold's GEMS election software, and they said there were critical security failures. In 2004, also Johns Hopkins University and Rice University studied Diebold software, and it was discovered malicious code had been programmed into the images on the touchscreen. They also, one of the professors has expressed concerns about the intercivic voting machines. And then another this is just a post on a thread. There's a quote saying, Diebold says the programming in the machines it sells now, including those to be used in Maryland, is not the same programming the Hopkins study looked at. Since the programming is also proprietary, Diebold won't show any new versions to anyone.
Can I interrupt you on this point too? Because there was somebody at the Board of Supervisors meeting today named Brent Turner, and he's an election security expert from Half Moon Bay, California. He's actually a staunch Democrat, and for the last 20 to 30 years, there's been an effort that has been brewing to use only open source software in election voting machines. And what they're requesting is for the Secretary of State to start a pilot program in Shasta or anywhere to test their open source voting machine. And it was just interesting to hear that. And that's a lot of people, their main concern is that this is not open source. So the Dominion having proprietary software is blocking us from being able to see what's going on inside, what the actual code is. And he mentioned that there's 2 places that use this new system. I'm not necessarily a proponent. I think machines have problems, but New Hampshire and Mississippi have used the new system with the open source software. And the problem is that sometimes what they do is they give the software to the Secretary of State, supposedly to put, and they do put it into an escrow state where in fact, even though nobody's has direct access to see what the code is, it's actually in possession of the Secretary of State. And they found that sometimes there was a different code out in the field than there was in the escrow account.
Exactly. So I have looked all around this, and I can give you basically from 2000 all the way to now, just example after example after example where they found, and they keep saying, well, the machines are better. And then I have a quote from 2020 that says all the problems they had in 2000 they're still having. It's because they don't want to solve the problem. It's because they want to steal elections. So the machines, no matter how you do it, I believe they can be manipulated in some way. But we don't just have the machines. We have voter registration. You got dirty voter rolls. You have to have dirty voter rolls because the machines can't manipulate votes if they don't have ballots to represent them. And so they don't have to even have actual ballots. They just have to have voters. You have dirty voter rolls that have people that have been dead 100 years, right? And other people that don't exist, and addresses of people that moved away, whatever. The machines can't manipulate if the ballots are absolutely made sure that those ballots coincide with an actual voter. So you have to have the signature verification. But frankly, you need to get rid of the mail-in ballots, because those mail-in ballots, to just everybody, that's how they're stacking this. They get voter rolls dirty, they stack the votes in the mail-in ballots because they can say that those people voted, and then the machines finish it.
And the chain of custody issue, too, that we talked about earlier.
Right. Only people that have filled out the paperwork, have proven they exist, that they are a legal voter with an absentee ballot, only those. Then you have a lot less ballots to have to do chain of custody on. The problem with chain of custody is they made the problem so big that they can say, yeah, can't do it, it's too many votes, too many ballots. That's the dumbest thing that we have done, is to send out ballots to everybody. That started back when Alex Padilla was still in the Senate. He actually proposed and got passed a law during Obama that everybody that signed up for Cover California, they were automatically registered to vote. Of course, those are all people that are legally supposed to be able to vote. No. And DMV we think the DMV thing is a big deal, but the DMV was just an extension of that. So this has been going on for a long time. What does voting have to do with signing up for medical benefits? Nothing.
Yeah.
So,
what does voting have to do with driving a car? Nothing.
Nothing. Exactly. Well, and the assumption is, well, it's DMV. They check everything. Yeah, but they don't check votes. They don't do anything to check it.
Do they check citizenship?
It's hard to say. It's not an intentional thing.
Yep. Absolutely. I believe that is where they get the runway for the cheat, is through these voter rolls, the dirty voter rolls. We're not really being adequately represented at the state level, and our only choice now is to get up and do something local. in the local government or just in a local citizen group, a volunteer group, election observation group, something to that effect, where you can actually affect your local government, going to the Board of Supervisors meetings and standing up and speaking. And you have to try to overwhelm the cheat by getting out and voting. I absolutely encourage people to vote on election day, to bring a blue pen with you so that it's different from one that might be printed out by a high-speed printer.
Right.
And maybe, fill it in, but make it unique so that it's not something that is completely a square block, or a rectangle in our case.